UK pensioners shocked. HMRC's hidden trap on 3,000 savings sparks nationwide outrage. In the United Kingdom, millions of pensioners live with one eye constantly fixed on their bank accounts, carefully watching their savings grow, shrink, or sit perfectly still. For many, the small balance that once offered comfort and reassurance has begun to feel like a source of unease. What used to represent security, a few £1,000s tucked away for emergencies, now feels like an invitation for scrutiny from HMRC. That once quiet sense of safety has turned into anxiety, with older citizens worrying that their hard-earned savings could now place them under a magnifying glass of taxation and bureaucracy. Over the past few months, reports and rumors have spread through communities of retirees, suggesting that even modest savings of around $3,000 or more might attract unwanted tax attention. While not officially a rule or policy, this perception has created a wave of uncertainty. Pensioners across the country are asking the same questions. Will they be taxed more heavily? Will they face surprise deductions or confusing letters from HMRC? For many, the fear isn't simply about money, it's about the stress of navigating a system that feels increasingly complex, technical, and unsympathetic. Consider George, a 74-year-old retired postman from Derbyshire. He spent his working life waking up before dawn, sorting mail, and delivering letters in all weather. He never earned a large income, but he saved diligently, setting aside just over $3,000 over the years. It wasn't wealth, just a small safety net in case his boiler broke, his roof leaked, or he needed dental work. Then, one day, George heard from a neighbor that HMRC might start watching pensioners with a few £1,000s in savings more closely. His stomach sank. He had always been honest, always paid his taxes, and never hidden a penny. Yet suddenly, he found himself wondering if his modest savings made him a target. George's story is one echoed in towns and villages all across the UK. Retired people who have always tried to live within their means now find themselves facing a maze of financial rules. Frozen tax thresholds, rising pensions under the triple lock, and the complex taxation of pension withdrawals are combining to create confusion and frustration. The government's decision to freeze the personal tax allowance at $12,170, while state pensions continue to rise each year, means more retirees are being pulled into taxable territory, even though their standard of living hasn't actually improved. The triple lock was designed to protect pensioners by increasing payments each year by the highest of inflation, average earnings growth, or 2.5%. In principle, it's a safety net. In reality, when paired with frozen tax bans, it's becoming a trap. Every year, as pensions rise, more and more pensioners drift above the income tax threshold, often without even realizing it. Add in a few pounds of interest from savings or small withdrawals from private pension pots, and suddenly they're facing unexpected tax bills. This phenomenon, known as fiscal drag, has quietly drawn millions of ordinary pensioners into a system they were never meant to be part of. But the situation grows even more tangled when pensioners try to access their private savings. Since 2015, pension freedoms have allowed retirees to withdraw lump sums from their defined contribution pensions. Many use this money to pay for urgent repairs, medical needs, or to help their families. Yet HMRC's emergency tax system means these withdrawals are initially taxed as if the entire amount were a monthly income. The result? Pensioners are often overtaxed by thousands of pounds. They then have to fill out forms like P55, P53Z, or P50Z to claim their refunds, a process that can take months and feels almost impossible for those without digital skills or online access. Recently, it was reported that thousands of retirees received refunds averaging nearly $3,000 each after being hit by these emergency taxes. To those affected, it feels less like an accident and more like a punishment for trying to access their own money. Many describe the experience as stressful, humiliating, and unfair, especially when they've done nothing wrong. Take Margaret, for example, a widow in her late 70s living alone in Kent. She has a small occupational pension from her years as a teaching assistant alongside her state pension and a modest savings account that earns her a few £100s in interest each year. She never imagined she'd owe tax in retirement. But now, with frozen allowances and rising pension income, brown envelopes from HMRC land on her doorstep more often than she'd like. Each one fills her with dread. Has she made a mistake? Does she owe money? Margaret's situation mirrors that of millions of pensioners who suddenly find themselves on the tax radar for the first time in their lives. In fact, more than 8 million pensioners are now expected to be paying income tax within the next few years, many of them for the first time ever. These are not wealthy individuals with sprawling investments. They are people who followed the advice given for decades. Save responsibly, prepare for your future, and don't depend entirely on the state. And yet, their reward for doing exactly that seems to be a new layer of bureaucracy and financial stress. It's not just about pounds and pence, it's about dignity. For pensioners who work their whole lives, the idea of spending their later years wrestling with tax codes and refund forms feels deeply wrong. They expected security, not suspicion. They expected gratitude, not guilt. As the cost of living rises and essential expenses, from heating to food to prescriptions, continue to climb, every deduction matters. The public debate surrounding this issue is growing louder. Advocacy groups, economists, and politicians are increasingly calling on the government to review the personal tax allowance and introduce stronger protections for pensioners. Many argue that it's unjust to pull people with modest means into the tax net simply because thresholds haven't kept pace with inflation. Yet, on the other side, the government faces intense fiscal pressure. Britain's aging population, rising healthcare costs, and increasing public spending needs make it difficult to simply raise allowances without cutting elsewhere. And so, pensioners find themselves caught in the middle of this political tug-of-war between promises of fairness and the realities of balancing the national budget. The 3,000 threshold has become a symbol, not because of any official rule, but because it resonates with ordinary people. It represents the fragility of retirement in modern Britain, a point where security feels uncertain, and even small savings seem vulnerable. Pensioners chat about it over tea in community halls, asking each other if they should spend their savings now or hide them just in case. That kind of fear doesn't come from wealth, it comes from worry. And yet, amid this growing anxiety, there are sparks of resilience. Across the UK, pensioners are banding together, forming local advice groups, attending workshops, and learning to navigate the digital systems that once intimidated them. They are turning to charities, citizens' advice services, and even MPs for help. Many have become surprisingly adept with technology, using online calculators to track their income and understand how close they are to the tax threshold. These small acts of empowerment show that older citizens are not passive. They are adapting, fighting, and demanding fairness. Still, not everyone has the means or confidence to do so. For every tech-savvy Margaret, there's a George who feels lost in a sea of forms and figures. That's why clear communication from HMRC and stronger protections from policymakers are essential. Pensioners deserve simplicity and transparency, not confusion and fear. As this debate unfolds, one thing remains certain. The issue is not going away. The triple lock will likely lift pensions again next year. Interest rates, while modest, are improving, meaning more pensioners will earn small returns from their savings. And with frozen thresholds extending further into the decade, fiscal drag will continue to pull more retirees into taxable territory. Unless significant reforms are made, the feeling of being targeted will only spread. For pensioners and their families, the message is clear. Awareness is power. Understanding how income, savings, and taxation interact can help avoid surprises. Respond to HMRC letters promptly. Seek advice from trusted sources. Don't let confusion turn into crisis, but also remember that this issue isn't yours alone. It's a national question of fairness, respect, and responsibility. Because at its heart, this story is not about numbers. It's about people. $3,000 isn't a fortune. It's a symbol of a lifetime's effort, thrift, and hope for a bit of comfort in later years. To think that such a small cushion can trigger fear says something profound about the fragility of retirement in Britain today. It forces us to ask, what kind of country do we want to be? One where our elders live in anxiety, or one where they can finally rest in peace and dignity, knowing that their careful saving and honesty are honored, not penalized? So the next time you hear that HMRC is targeting pensioners with $3,000 in savings, remember that the truth runs deeper than any headline. It's not about one policy. It's about how a web of frozen thresholds, rising costs, and rigid systems collide with the everyday realities of aging. And behind every statistic stands someone like George or Margaret, people who gave their best years to building the nation, and who now deserve the simple peace of knowing their golden years will be free from unnecessary worry.